It wasn't a sound that woke me up. It was a smell. A sharp metallic tang that tasted like copper pennies and rotten eggs. It drifted through the cracks of my reinforced log cabin, overpowering the scent of pine and rain. I lay still for exactly 30 seconds, controlling my breathing. My heart rate was 48 beats per minute. Steady. I bought this 500-acre stretch of the Appalachian Mountains for one reason: silence. I paid $300,000 of my Marine Corps retirement money to ensure that the only neighbor I had was the wind. But for the last 3 nights, the wind had brought something else. I rolled out of bed, grabbing the thermal monocular from my nightstand. It was 3:17 a.m. I moved to the window, scanning the tree line. Nothing. No heat signatures. No movement. Just the endless, dark forest. But my gut, the same gut that kept me alive through 4 tours in Iraq and Syria, was screaming that something was wrong. I stepped out onto the porch. The air was heavy. Then I saw it. Down by the creek that ran through the center of my property, something was glowing. Not a fire. It was a faint, sickly green luminescence rippling through the water. And on the bank, lying stiff in the mud, was a massive buck. A 12-point stag. It hadn't been shot. It hadn't been mauled by a bear. It looked melted. I walked down to the water's edge, my boots sinking into mud that felt unnaturally warm. I dipped a pH strip, part of my survival kit, into the water. It turned black instantly. Someone wasn't just trespassing on my land. Someone was killing it. And they had made a fatal mistake. They assumed the owner of this land was just a tired old veteran who wanted to sleep. They were about to find out that retired doesn't mean expired. My name is Elias Thorne. For 20 years I was a scout sniper. My job was to be invisible, to watch, to wait, and to eliminate threats before they even knew I was there. When I retired, I didn't want parades. I didn't want a security job at a mall. I wanted to disappear. That's why I bought Blackwood Ridge. The deal seemed too good to be true. The seller, a corporate entity called Apex Energy Solutions, had sold me this prime land for half its market value. The CEO, a man named Sterling Vance, had shaken my hand personally. He told me, "Mr. Thorne, we respect your service. We want this land to go to someone who will protect it. We just want to retain the mineral rights for future exploration." Purely theoretical, of course. I signed the papers. I thought I was getting a sanctuary. Now, looking at the poisoned water, I realized I hadn't bought a sanctuary. I had bought a cover-up. I spent the next morning patrolling my perimeter. 5 miles of rugged terrain. My fence line was intact. No cut wires. No forced gates. But then I found the anomaly. In the northwest quadrant, there was a ravine. Steep, rocky, and almost impassable. But as I looked closer at the ground, I saw it. The moss on the rocks wasn't disturbed by feet. It was crushed, compressed. I measured the width of the compression. 8 feet. Too wide for an ATV. Too narrow for a standard tank. This was a specialized vehicle. Something with low-pressure tires designed to move heavy loads without leaving deep tracks. Ghost trucks. We used them in special ops to move supplies through enemy territory without leaving a trace. Why was a ghost truck driving through my mountain at 3 a.m.? I followed the phantom tracks for 2 miles. They led to a sheer cliff face, a dead end, or so it seemed. I pulled out my knife and scraped the rock face. It wasn't stone. It was hardened composite foam, painted to look like granite. Camouflage. I pushed against the fake rock. It swung open on silent hydraulic hinges. Behind the cliff wasn't a cave. It was a tunnel, a paved, lit tunnel leading deep into the mountain I supposedly owned. I stood there in the darkness, realizing the magnitude of the lie. Apex Energy hadn't sold me this land because they liked veterans. They sold it to me because they needed a guard dog, a patsy, someone who would keep hikers away while they hollowed out the earth from the inside. I didn't enter the tunnel, not yet. Rule number 1 of reconnaissance: Never engage until you know the enemy's strength. I returned to my cabin to gear up. I opened my floor safe. Inside was my suppressed DMR rifle, my ghillie suit, and my comms gear. As I was checking my mags, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. Same number, I answered. Thorn. Static. And then a voice that stopped my heart. Elias, if you're picking this up, it means the sensors I planted on your ridge just got tripped. I froze. I knew that voice. It was Marcus, my spotter. Marcus died 3 years ago in Syria. I saw the explosion. I held his dog tags. I know what you're thinking, the voice continued. I'm dead. Well, let's just say the CIA has a funny way of filing paperwork. It was a pre-recorded message, triggered by a proximity sensor I must have walked past near the tunnel. Listen to me, Elias, you didn't buy that land by accident. I steered you there. I hacked the listings. I made sure you were the only buyer Apex Energy would accept. I sat down heavily on my bunk. My dead best friend had manipulated me into this. Apex Energy isn't an energy company, Marcus's voice said, his tone turning grim. Sterling Vance is washing money for the cartel, but that's the small stuff. The big stuff is what they're dumping. Nuclear byproduct, medical waste, stuff that costs billions to dispose of legally. They're turning your mountain into a radioactive tomb. The recording crackled. I've been deep cover for 2 years. I'm close to exposing them, but I needed an anchor on the inside. Someone who wouldn't sell out. Someone who could hold the ground when the shooting starts. That's you, brother. Check the old water tower on the East Ridge. There's a package.
Good hunting, Marine.
The line went dead. I wasn't just angry. I was focused. Marcus was alive, and he had turned my retirement into a black op. I geared up, ghillie suit on, rifle checked. I wasn't a landowner anymore. I was an asset in play. I waited for nightfall. I moved to the East Ridge water tower. Inside a rusted pipe, I found Marcus's package. A sat phone, an encrypted hard drive, and a dossier. The dossier contained photos. Sterling Vance shaking hands with senators. Manifests of ships docking in Charleston, carrying industrial machinery that was actually barrels of toxic sludge. And a map of the tunnel system beneath my feet. It was massive. A labyrinth of old coal mines repurposed into a dumping ground. At 0200 hours, the ground began to vibrate. I was positioned on a ridge overlooking the fake cliff entrance. The hydraulic door opened. Out rolled a convoy. 3 blacked-out semi-trucks, flanked by 2 SUVs with mounted spotlights. Mercenaries. I recognized their gear. Private military contractors, PMCs. High-cut helmets, quad nods, night vision, customized carbines. These weren't security guards. These were headhunters. I watched through my scope as they drove the trucks deep into the valley. They stopped near the creek, my creek. Men in yellow hazmat suits jumped out. They connected hoses to the tankers. They weren't just storing the waste. They were pumping it directly into the water table. They were poisoning the aquifer that fed 3 counties. I zoomed in on the lead SUV. A man stepped out. He wasn't wearing a hazmat suit. He was wearing a tuxedo like he had just come from a gala. Sterling Vance. He lit a cigar, watching the green sludge pump into the pristine water. He looked bored. I adjusted my scope. The crosshairs settled on his chest. It would be so easy. 600 yards. No wind, 1 squeeze. But Marcus's note was clear. Don't kill the head. Kill the body. We need them exposed, not martyred. I engaged my camera. I recorded everything. The faces of the mercs. The labels on the barrels. Vance laughing as a raccoon drank the water and convulsed. Then I made my move. I needed to plant a tracker on the lead truck. I needed to know where they were coming from. I slithered down the ridge, moving like smoke. I got within 10 feet of the convoy. I could smell the sulfur and the expensive cologne Vance wore. I slapped a magnetic GPS puck onto the rear axle of the tanker. Snap. A twig broke under my boot. Every head turned. Contact left, a merc shouted. I didn't run. I vanished. I rolled into a ditch, covered myself in leaves, and slowed my heart rate. Flashlights swept over me. Boots stomped inches from my head. "Probably a deer," one of them muttered. "Check the perimeter," Vance yelled. "We can't have witnesses." They searched for an hour. They never found me. But now they knew they weren't alone. By dawn, I was back in the cabin. I uploaded the footage to the secure server Marcus gave me. Then I made a call. Not to the police. Vance owned the local sheriff. I called the number Marcus left for Agent Miller, YPA Criminal Investigation Division. Miller answered on the first ring. "Thorne, Marcus told me you'd call." "I have the footage," I said. "I have the GPS data." "When are you coming?" "We need more," Miller said. "Vance has lawyers who can argue that video is deep-faked. We need to catch him in the act, with federal agents present. We need a raid." "He's coming back tonight," I lied. He wasn't scheduled to return for a week, but I was going to make him come back. I went out to the hidden road. I planted a series of remote charges, not explosives, but flashbangs and smoke. Then I drove my truck to the fake cliff door. I parked it sideways, blocking the entrance. I spray-painted a message on the rock face. "I know what's in the water." Then I took a picture and sent it to Vance's personal number, which was in the dossier. The bait was taken. 3 hours later, a helicopter appeared on the horizon. Vance wasn't sending a crew this time. He was coming to clean up the mess himself. He brought a small army, 6 SUVs, 12 shooters. They breached my main gate. They swarmed the property. I watched from my hide site, 800 yards up the mountain. "Agent Miller," I whispered into my comms, "are you seeing this?" "We have a drone overhead," Miller replied. "We see armed combatants entering private property. We are 10 minutes out." Vance stepped out of the lead SUV. He had a megaphone. "Mr. Thorne," awed, his voice echoed off the canyon walls. "You're a patriot. I know you want to protect your land. Let's make a deal. $5 million cash. Just walk away." I didn't answer. Instead, I triggered the first charge. Boom! A flashbang exploded near his feet. Vance scrambled back. "Find him!" he screamed. "Kill him and burn this cabin to the ground." His men fanned out. They moved into the woods. Into my woods. I had set tripwires, pitfalls, noise traps. For the next 10 minutes, it wasn't a battle. It was a lesson. One by one, his mercenaries hit my traps. They were blinded by smoke, tangled in nets, disoriented by noise. I moved among them, disarming them, zip-tying them. I didn't fire a single lethal shot. I left them tied to trees like Christmas ornaments. Finally, only Vance was left. He was standing by his SUV, holding a gold-plated pistol, shaking. I stepped out of the shadows. "You're trespassing," I said. Vance spun around, aiming the gun. "You can't touch me!" he screamed. "I own this state." "You own nothing," I said. And then the sky erupted. 3 Black Hawk helicopters crested the ridge. FBI, EPA, National Guard. Dust swirled as agents rappelled down. "Federal agents!" "Drop the weapon!" Vance dropped the gun. He fell to his knees, weeping. It took them 3 days to catalog everything. The tunnels were filled with thousands of barrels of Class A toxic waste. Vance had been charging corporations millions to make their problems disappear. He was looking at life in prison, RICO charges, environmental terrorism. As the agents were loading the last of the evidence, a black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down. It was Marcus, alive. He had a scar on his cheek, but that same grin. "I told you it was good hunting," he said. "You used me as bait," I grumbled. "I used you as the hammer," he corrected. "And you nailed him." It took 2 years to clean the creek. The EPA Superfund project scrubbed the soil. The green glow is gone. The water is clear again. I still live here. The silence is back. But now when I wake up at 3 a.m., it's not because of a smell. It's just to watch the sunrise over a mountain that is finally, truly clean. They thought they could bury their sins in my backyard. They forgot one thing. Dirt is where a sniper does his best work. I'm Elias Thorne, and this is my land. Thanks for watching.